My beloved brothers and sisters, open your eyes and open your hearts, for the trumpet is sounding in secret halls, and what has been whispered in closed rooms shall soon thunder upon the mountains. What was once whispered behind closed doors, what was once mapped in confidential documents, what was once denied in public and embraced in secret, is now stepping into the light of day. The time of exposure has come. For years the world has watched the silent glances exchanged between India and Israel, two nations, two ancient civilizations, each carved by struggle, resistance, and an unbreakable will to survive. Their alliance has not been loud, nor has it been boastful. It has been quiet, calculated, and deliberate. And now, the shadows that once concealed their shared strategies are being peeled away layer by layer. This alliance goes beyond mere politics. It is more than trade, more than defense agreements, more than diplomatic handshakes on global platforms. This is something deeper, something prophetic. In the grand timeline of history, certain alliances are not formed by man alone, but allowed by the hand of the Almighty. India and Israel, two nations surrounded by hostility, yet standing firm, have been slowly brought together by divine orchestration. They share more than intelligence and satellite data. They share a spiritual DNA, the understanding of endurance, of being surrounded by enemies, of being misrepresented in global narratives, and yet remaining rooted in identity. This exposure is not accidental. Timing is everything. For decades, lies have been sold as truth in the matter of POK. The narrative was manipulated. The pain of the displaced was ignored. The manipulation of maps and minds continued, while the global community looked away. But truth has a shelf life, and deception has an expiry date. That date is arriving. The light is shining into places long buried in political dust, and what was once hidden is now becoming undeniable. Leaks are no longer deniable slips. They are divine alarms. POK, Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir is not just a disputed piece of land. It is a wound that has festered on the conscience of both justice and humanity. And what we are witnessing now is a rising will to heal that wound. India, with its patience tested and limits reached, and Israel, with its unmatched technological prowess and intelligence insight, have come together with precision. Not in chaos, but in strategy, not in revenge, but in resolve. This moment of exposure is uncovering more than plans. It is unveiling intention. It is revealing that what some thought was weakness was actually wisdom. It is showing that behind silence was strength. While others were playing loud games in the name of diplomacy, India and Israel were writing history behind the veil, and now the veil is lifting. Heaven has watched. Earth is responding. The time for shallow headlines is over. The time of prophetic movements has begun. What was hidden to man was always known by God, and when God begins to reveal, no nation, no army, no alliance of lies can cover what is being exposed. This is not merely a tale of treaties and tactical maneuvers. This is a moment soaked in divine timing. What is unfolding between India and Israel cannot be boxed within the boundaries of traditional diplomacy. While the world sees military drills, defense deals, satellite coordination, and cyber intelligence exchange, a deeper current runs beneath the surface. It is not a war machine being built. It is a prophetic alignment. The kind of alignment that only heaven can orchestrate, where timing, purpose, and power converge to correct long-standing injustices. For far too long, the international community has been distracted by louder conflicts, while regions like Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir were kept in limbo. Forgotten by the mainstream narrative, yet not forgotten by heaven. That land carries generations of suffering, and it has been claimed under falsehoods, enforced through violence, and maintained by deception. The question was never if justice would come, but when, and that when is no longer in the distant future. It is at the doorstep. India, patient yet alert, has endured the long game of diplomatic restraint. It did not rush in haste, but neither did it forget. It waited for alignment, and Israel, a nation forged through centuries of dispersion and miraculous survival, understands the value of divine timing more than most. Both nations have walked paths of isolation, where support was minimal and enemies were many, and yet both endured. not through sheer power, but through providence, and now they are not merely cooperating, they are aligning. When two nations are positioned by divine intent, their actions go beyond mere territorial recovery. What they seek is not revenge, but restoration. What they aim for is not a show of might, but a manifestation of justice. This is why the partnership between India and Israel matters, because they are not responding from rage, they are responding from revelation. They know the time has come, they sense the shift in the spiritual atmosphere. The intelligence they share is not just technological, it is intuitive. They are being moved by something higher than political ambition. They are being stirred by the breath of truth itself. This is not about colonizing or conquering. This is about reclaiming what was unlawfully taken. The strategy they now employ is precise, almost surgical, because it is not driven by chaos. It is ordered, structured, measured, because when something is birthed by divine timing, it doesn't stumble in. It arrives with authority. And when it arrives, even the powers that once mocked it stand in awe. We must understand nations do not always act in God's time, but sometimes, rarely, a window opens when a nation's will aligns with God's justice. And when two such nations move together, even the boundaries drawn by deception begin to tremble. It is not muscle alone that makes empires fall. It is when righteousness and courage walk hand in hand. And right now, we are witnessing that walk. POK is not just a stretch of mountains and valleys caught between contentious borders. It is a land soaked in the silent cries of generations who once called it home. It is not merely a geopolitical dispute. It is a moral wound, a scar on the conscience of a region, a disruption in the harmony of a people, and a story that was interrupted before it could reach its rightful ending. The soil of POK bears witness to dreams that were uprooted, identities that were stripped, and voices that were silenced. But silence does not erase truth, and suppression does not erase history. What was stolen under the cover of confusion and conflict still belongs to the voice of truth, and that truth has not been forgotten. The world may have moved on, papers may have been signed, borders may have been drawn and redrawn by political hands. But the voice of history remains etched into the very stones of that land. It knows where it belongs. It knows who was driven out and why. It remembers the names of the families that were scattered, the temples and homes that were desecrated, and the promises that were never kept. And history, real history, is not easily erased. It breathes, it waits, and when the appointed hour arrives, it rises again, not to beg for justice, but to demand it. The tragedy of POK is not only what was done, but how long it has been ignored. A land occupied not merely in body, but in narrative. A land used as a pawn in a larger game while its people became invisible. But the heavens do not forget. Every injustice is recorded. Every cry that was buried under rubble or drowned in propaganda was heard. And what heaven hears, heaven answers, in time, in truth, and in power. That time is now awakening. That answer is beginning to form. When a land has been unjustly seized, when its people are denied their voice, and when truth is distorted for decades, a reckoning begins to stir in the atmosphere. Not one of vengeance, but of restoration, a divine correction, because no land stolen under deception will remain untouched forever. Sooner or later, justice demands its place, not just in the courts of men, but in the chronicles of the earth. POK is crying not for war, but for return, not for more bloodshed, but for belonging, and that cry is echoing louder than ever before. Its mountains have stood still, but not silent. Its rivers have continued to flow, but with the memory of what they once carried. The temples once filled with song are now hollow, but the songs still linger in the spirit realm. And when the voice of truth aligns with the voice of history, no force on earth can suppress what heaven has remembered. Israel and India share a connection that defies geographical distance, religious boundaries, and cultural differences. It is not the kind of alliance built through loud declarations or ceremonial optics. It is forged quietly in the background, through layers of shared experience, mutual respect, and a deeply ingrained understanding of struggle. Both nations have walked through fire, not once, but repeatedly. They have been tested by wars, betrayal, terrorism, and isolation. And in those trials they discovered something rare, a silent brotherhood rooted in resilience, in sacrifice, and in the unspoken strength of enduring long, hard battles alone. This partnership did not erupt onto the world stage through spectacle. It developed behind the curtains of mainstream diplomacy, in rooms where strategy, foresight, and truth were not just spoken, but deeply understood. Israel, a nation that rose from the ashes of genocide and dispersion, has become a symbol of strength through survival. India, a civilization ancient and yet youthful in its rebirth as a modern nation, has navigated the storms of colonialism, internal turmoil, and external aggression with measured resolve. They both have been underestimated, misrepresented, and in many ways left to chart their paths without guarantees of support. What brings them together is not convenience but conviction. It is not just the alignment of national interests. It is the connection between two peoples who have learned what it means to stand when others fall, to endure when others surrender, and to rise when others expect defeat. There is a deep wisdom that comes from pain, especially the kind of pain that is not always seen by the world. Both Israel and India have experienced the sting of terror, the weight of defending their borders from invaders, and the constant challenge of preserving identity while navigating hostile surroundings. Their cooperation is more than military drills or technological exchanges. It is a deep, seated understanding that freedom must be defended, not in words, but in preparedness. Intelligence, both in the literal and spiritual sense, is their armor. They know that security cannot be borrowed, it must be built, and in the face of threats, both external and internal, they have chosen not to be victims, but victors. There is also a shared pain, a silent pain, that runs beneath this alliance. It is the pain of watching history manipulated, borders violated, and truth compromised. But instead of allowing that pain to destroy them, they've allowed it to sharpen their resolve, to refine their mission, and to bind them together in unshakable solidarity. This brotherhood is not loud because it does not need to be. It speaks through action, through presence, and through the quiet confidence that those who have survived much owe it to history to stand tall. Their partnership is a message that resilience can be shared, that wisdom can travel beyond language, and that in a world fractured by superficial alliances, there still exists a brotherhood built not on paper, but on principle. There is a tendency in the world to mistake quietness for weakness, to confuse patience with passivity, and to assume that those who do not shout are incapable of shaking foundations. But history, both sacred and secular, reveals a different pattern. When the righteous rise, they do not rise gradually, they rise suddenly. They emerge not with hesitation, but with the force of divine timing. And when they do, justice does not crawl at storms. It arrives with a pace and precision that catches every oppressor off guard. The righteous are not always in the spotlight. Often they are hidden, mocked, dismissed as irrelevant or too slow. But the righteous are not concerned with visibility. They are concerned with alignment. They wait, they build, they observe, and they prepare. And in that preparation lies their strength. Because when the moment comes, they do not step, they strike. They do not ask for permission. They move with authority. That movement is not reckless, but calculated. It does not seek chaos, but correction. And that correction, when it comes, is swift. Oppressors build their empires on the illusion that nothing will ever change. They rely on the world's short memory and the silence of those they've wounded. They operate in deception, believing their manipulations are hidden forever. But what they forget is that righteousness is not absent, it is watching. And when it moves with the power of every ignored truth and every buried cry. The rise of the righteous is not a result of ambition. It is a response to injustice. It is not born out of ego. It is born out of necessity. And once it begins, it cannot be stopped. Like a storm that gathers in silence and then breaks without warning, it overturns what was once thought untouchable. Strongholds begin to fall. False narratives begin to crumble. The proud are humbled and the humble are elevated. In the case of nations like India and Israel, this rise is not just military, it is moral. Their strength is not only in their defense systems, but in the righteousness of their cause. They are not seeking domination, they are seeking restoration, and that restoration is not waiting on the approval of global councils. It is being activated by a higher authority. Those who thought these nations would remain confined to silence are beginning to realize the shift. The atmosphere is changing, and with it, the positions of power. When the righteous rise, they do not need to shout to be heard. Their actions speak louder than declarations. Their integrity outlasts propaganda. And their victories are not stolen, they are earned. It is a rise that exposes lies, reverses injustices, and reclaims what was unlawfully taken. It is sudden because it is sure. It is forceful because it is just. And when it comes, it is no longer a matter of if, but when, and that when no longer sits in some far off tomorrow. It is approaching quickly, wrapped in silence, but armed with truth. There is a dangerous misconception in the hearts of the arrogant, that silence means absence, that delay means denial, and that patience equals powerlessness. But heaven operates on a different timetable than man. God does not react in haste like men do. He does not speak simply to be heard. He watches, he weighs, and he waits, not because he is indifferent, but because he is strategic. And when he acts, it is not impulsive, it is final. Every act of injustice, every drop of innocent bloodshed, every land encroached upon by force and deceit, none of it is forgotten. It is all recorded in the courts of heaven. To those who manipulate the truth, who twist history, who commit atrocities under the veil of politics and ambition, it may seem that God is silent, but what they mistake for silence is simply the deep breath before divine intervention. What they assume is ignorance is actually mercy being extended for a season, and what they believe is triumph is merely a stage being set for their exposure. God is not distant from the cries of the oppressed. He hears the whispers of the wounded, the groans of the land that has been stolen, and the unspoken agony of people who have lived under false rule. He hears the midnight prayers of mothers who lost sons to border conflicts. He sees the children growing up in refugee camps, detached from their ancestral land, and he does not forget. His silence is not abandonment, it is arrangement. He is arranging justice like a master tactician arranges the pieces on a board, knowing exactly when and where to move. History is filled with examples of nations and empires that thought they could mock justice, that thought they could suppress truth forever. But truth is not a man-made idea, it is divine, it cannot be buried forever. And when it rises, it exposes everything built on lies. When God begins to judge, he does not judge lightly. He does not strike the innocent. He strikes the system that oppresses the innocent. He uproots what man called permanent and reveals what man tried to hide. So those who have taken lands that do not belong to them, who have silenced people through violence, who have rewritten maps through deception, they may sit smugly in their palaces and parliament halls. But there is a higher court in session, one that cannot be bribed, manipulated, or delayed. And in that court every cry has been heard, every tear has been collected, and every injustice has been documented. God's judgment is not random, it is precise. It does not come when man demands it. It comes when the time is right, and when it comes it is not partial, and it is not mistaken. It restores what was broken, redeems what was stolen, and reverses the strength of the oppressor. That kind of justice doesn't make headlines, it makes history.